Dropped? Oh, Erica is here. Hi, Erica.
How are you?
Hello,
Uh,
magical Erica, talking about massively huge. I was fooling around earlier. I was pulling my beard out all wild to tease Beena, but she didn't even notice. So
Oh,
never mind. Wild and crazy, but anyway, so she didn't even notice. Yeah. So
well,
much for
Venus,
that. So much for
you
that.
have a good birthday yesterday.
oh, it was actually uh, more than my expectations.
Oh,
It was
good.
good. It was good. Uh, I was out with my family and have a wonderful time with family and friends. And music was good. Food was amazing, and everything was like wow. And I was amazed by how everything comes together in a very precise way. So
That
that was
is awesome.
I was amazed by that because it was beyond my expectations,
Yeah,
literally.
that is great.
Most
So it was
excellent.
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Glad.
you
And
had
how
a
are
bunch
you?
of
How are you
magical
doing?
food.
Good, good. Yeah, I'm doing well.
How's the sleep going? It does seem a little better.
It's been a little better. I got a better night's sleep last night than I have in a little while. Still
Oh,
tired,
good, good.
but doing better. And yeah, just in general, doing well. Um, doing
Most excellent.
lots of
Uh-huh.
thinking
And
and feeling
how's your
well.
how's your music classes going on?
Um, they're going. I've done a really horrible job of practicing on a regular basis. I always come
Wow.
back around to this concept of
Please say it again. Please say it again because I think that this is an achievement because you were calling yourself that recovering perfectionist. So now it is actually happening now. You did a
oh yeah, for
horrible
sure.
job.
Yeah.
So yes.
Um, but yeah, I have kind of come back around to this idea numerous times that I seem to. I mean, one of the reasons that I want to downsize our house is that this whole space is just like there's always something, not just one thing, but like numerous things on the to-do list of things to be done at any given time. And with the animals, with all these various different responsibilities and classes and different things that I have going on, there there's always, it's like I'm just kind of chasing things around in a circle and never, I feel like I never actually get anything accomplished, and my music stuff ends up falling by the wayside because it's an easy one to just say, well, I don't have time for that, I'll do that tomorrow, and then it never gets done. So I've said many times, sometimes I wonder if I need to just like really simplify my schedule and just focus on one thing for a certain period of time and
Yeah.
make some progress there, and then set that aside and come over to this thing and focus on that, because I try to do all of these different things at the same time, thinking, well, I don't want to set this aside or I don't want to stop this, and I basically tend to get nothing done. So
Oh,
I'm still trying to figure out how, the right combination of doing things. I mean, like drawing and painting, I would love to be doing more of that, but that's one of those things that I only get it done if I set everything else aside and say, I am doing nothing but this for, this day or whatever. So,
hmm.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. I really, really want to do more with my music studies and make some progress there, but it just, there's always competing priorities. So, still trying to figure out the right combination.
It is tricky
So
because
what is the
oh,
feeling? I'm sorry, I'm just
oh,
very
go ahead.
curious about what are the feelings coming up when you okay, I'm not doing it the way I wanted to.
um, what are the feelings that come up? I think, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of different and sort of conflicting feelings, but I mean, I think one is, I don't want to say it's not disappointment exactly, but really just kind of a um, sadness, I guess, that there are a lot of things that I
Yeah.
really get a lot of joy from participating in that
Pity.
I never, it's like I really want to do this, but I have all these other things I need to be doing. And, there's a lot of overwhelm, I think, with not knowing where to start um, when I have all of these things happening at the same time. So, um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Really
Something
interesting.
I would throw in here is that the idea of doing one at a time and then that won't really work because things like music and art, these are lifetime pursuits.
Well, right. And that's part of my trouble is um I've said this many times that I have many, many varied interests. And I've spent a lot of time, thinking, well, I should be focusing on one thing. I need to find one thing and really master it and just pick this and stick with that so that I can actually make progress. And there's there is never one thing that I feel right about setting everything else aside for.
Correct.
There's
Correct.
always, I'm just always being pulled in many, many different directions. And on the one hand, I've sort of come to a place of acceptance over the fact that that seems to just be the way I am. But I still don't feel like I've found the right balance of how to appropriately participate in all of these things, um, and actually participate in them rather than just sort of run around and put out fires or do one little thing. Which, like I said, I mean, I've been taking guitar lessons for like 2.5, probably almost 3 years now. And I feel like I've made very little progress because I just do these little, oh, okay, I'm going to practice or I'm going to have my lesson for 1 hour once a week. And I don't practice any of the rest of the time. And, I don't actually make any progress or get to a point where I'm able to really utilize this as a creative outlet that I have mastered, or that even, not even mastered, but just gotten to a level of proficiency where I can actually do this in a creative outlet fashion. It's just kind of so I have come to this point many times of, well, do I need to just set aside, I mean, as much as this seems to be my nature of having all of these varied interests and wanting to participate in all these different things, do I need to just pick one and set aside all of the rest and at least get to a point of proficiency in one area, um, and just suck it up and get over the fact that I have to set all of the rest of the things that I'm interested in aside, because I don't seem to make any progress when I'm, trying to sort of co-mingle all of the rest of them.
Seem to. There's the key. There's the key. The last time I saw you play the guitar, that was a considerable difference to the very first time.
Well, it's interesting you say that because for me, I mean, I have discovered, I was actually just thinking about this the other day, that all of the varied things that have happened in my guitar lessons over the last few years, I think I've actually made the most progress on my own learning. Like my guitar, I have tried multiple times to explain to my guitar teacher how I think I learn and what I need. And he's a very nice person personally, but I don't think he's a particularly proficient teacher. And so I think, to me, I'm like, I actually think I am just as proficient at the things that I learned on my own prior to taking these lessons. Then I mean, I don't think I have really made any particular progress in any of the things that he has taught me. I think I've kind of maintained a level of proficiency at the things that I learned on
Interesting.
my own prior. Um,
Interesting.
so, it's just I don't know. I still haven't. I'm not necessarily, I mean, at this point, I'm not necessarily looking for some super obvious answer or solution. I'm just kind of
Why?
thinking
I
about it and trying to
yeah,
figure out,
yeah.
what's going to be the next thing to try.
Let me add a little expansion to this, because that just for perspective, when anybody undertakes learning, when they through the novice phase is always the phase that feels the longest. And when you look at exponential learning, it's that flat part of the curve at the bottom, and then it kicks up. So this is unfortunately what most don't realize with learning, that you are learning and it is exponential, but it feels flat, right? Because you look
Right.
at exponential curves and then they kick up. So we have to get through that plateau stage, or the apparent plateau stage, and that. So this is only my caution here. It may be that it's not a steady upward curve, but it's pretty flat. That's possible. But just be aware that you may be perceiving it as flat when it's not actually so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Plus, I would say, when you are focused on learning and the techniques and mechanisms of learning itself, at some point, that learning translates from painting into music, into dancing, into whatever.
Right.
Right?
Right.
The learning brain itself, understanding emphasis, for instance, perspective shifting, thinking through to the end, they all come about. Now, of course, you've got physical things to do, but still you have this ability to apply the abstract tools of learning. So I would say, just kind of stick with it maybe, and see how you can carry over learning itself, abstracting the different techniques of learning
Right.
from one to the other, and
Right.
thereby accelerate the
That's
ability.
well, that's a big part of what I've been doing. Like I said, I've
I imagine,
been
yeah.
having these conversations with my guitar teacher about, I really am seeing that I learn the best when I'm approaching it from this perspective, and I really need this and I need this, and I just don't think
Yeah.
he's very proficient at the instrument himself, but I don't think he's in a
Correct.
place where he
Correct.
understands how to
Correct.
adapt
Correct.
the
A
technique.
proficiency in the skill is not necessarily carrying over into proficiency of teaching.
No,
I,
not
for instance, like when it comes to art, I can certainly help somebody with their art, like with Sher now. But me doing it myself, I'm hopeless.
right.
So because I'm understanding learning, and well, I'm not trying to get her to learn art. It's about retraining the brain. It's a different intent, but nonetheless, you know, art and art techniques and all this come about. So, it's the ability to explain, the ability to communicate, the ability to conceptualize. These are necessary from a teaching point of view. And the ability to be aware of the student, in other words, capital H, hearing. This is the most
Right.
critical skill. So if they don't have that, they're just teaching formula.
Right.
And if formula doesn't work, that's
Right.
counterproductive. So, talking about that, it's something I've been wanting to share with you for a while. I got a couple of things to share with you. Um, which first? Oh, gosh. Oh, dreadful decisions. All right. So I'll go with this one first, because I want to send this to you. I'm just going to share the overview of it here. Um, uh, so I'll send you the link for this. And this was originally part of the psychology of psychology, in the motive psychology, right? Um, eh, it was incorporated into that, but I've now separated it into a standalone. Um, it's not a program or a course, I guess, a standalone content, right? So how to take my screen sharing? No, I'm not
No.
there. I'm talking as if it's there. Okay, here we go. So this year was originally, like I said, part of the psychology of psychology, the motive psychology. How to take it, and so I've been wanting to do this as a standalone thing and formalize it, rather than just telling people on Zoom what it's all about.
Right.
So I'm just gonna skip the quotes, the little intro, and here we go. Right, so 9 tasks of doing, a little expanded on things, but I put in self-honesty and honesty as a task of doing, because I noticed that yes, eventually, all the participants so far have come to this to greater or lesser degrees. But to put it in as a task ahead of time, I thought this is quite necessary. So
Right.
then the ones you're familiar with, of course, repeat backs, takeaways, dictionary of tower, task and exercise, posting, which, I've set it here as not obligatory, but also not entirely voluntary. And I kind of minimized this, and I thought that for, anybody coming in the future, I do want to make it a bit more of a part of the thing, because I do see it at the massive helpfulness and value of it, not just for the participant, but for me also.
Right.
Anyway, zooming application and then putting together an overview perspective, which, it comes in the last module of Way of Impeccability, which, one of the sessions in module 8 is what is Way of Impeccability.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also the overview perspective, which you do continually, to answer this question. What is, whatever the program is, what is capital H hearing? But also part of it is, and I wrote it out there, is to say, pay attention to your change and document your change,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is also part of the posting. Keep your journal, share where you're at. Because if we don't actually note it down, because the changes are fairly gradual, we normalize our
Right.
change,
Right.
and now we don't see it as change, right? And I've seen this happen where I keep attention to the profound changes that have gone on, but the individual doesn't feel like they've changed at all.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And then they'll like say, "Oh yeah, I did all that, but you know what? I didn't really change." And then, yeah, right. Well, you might not think so, but I can, give you some really clear proof of how much you've changed. Just
Right.
look at some of the videos. So it's a very, very important part of the whole deal. Okay, so then I have, instead of going through all of these individually, just like a typical session, I got the headings and all of the stuff, and just something I didn't have it very specifically emphasized, just the capitalizing, hyphenating, and so on. Yeah. Anyway, but then there's a second part. You probably noticed there was part one. Where's part two now? Okay, here we go. So no, essential understandings and awarenesses for learning and growth. So memory and understanding, in other words, the difference between memory learning and actual learning, right? Putting it on your hard drive as opposed to updating your operating system, emphasizing emphasis, perspective shifting, thinking things through to the end. This one doesn't really have to be in here, but I had it in just an awareness of the computer model for those who've got no clue, don't know what the difference in a hard drive and a whatever. Joy, delight, and earnestness, the importance of the association, right? Association management. Yeah, I should actually put that in. And then, of course, asking, this is capital P practice. It's also being wrong, and so on. So, so I'll send this to you, and when you get, if hopefully you get some chance, for 2 reasons. One, as kind of a refresher and an accentuator and emphasis of what we're already doing. And two, just to look at it from a new participant perspective, to
Mm-hmm.
say maybe, add this is also useful, whatever. I think this would be most instructive and most valuable for all concerned in many different ways. Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything offhand that comes to you as a necessary ingredient?
No.
No.
Nothing off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. So now, okay. So I'll send you the link, and like I said, something just when you get a moment to go through. A lot of it you can probably skim through, but again, from that kind of overview perspective, I'm looking just to get some alternative here in case, like especially in this endpoint here. I mean, these are key components to learning in general, and the computer model is particularly when learning about self, not necessarily learning about guitar, but 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 still, these are all about learning how to learn, which I think
Mhm.
was the one of the quotes here somewhere in it. No, no. All right. Okay. So next up is we come to something I wrote a long time ago, and um, you know what, Beena? This, yeah. Okay. So let's change this out. Uh, well, all right. It's going to be a lot to change, but instead of emotionally sensitive, it really should be the responsibilities of the oxygen being. Yeah. So, all right, I left it as empath here because, well, it just there's a lot to change. But I want to read this through because it's really something quite interesting, and you'll see how it comes about in a moment, or at least you read this one. Beena and I were reading through this, and it's a whole thing that I've written. It needs to be edited, but in the editing there's power. So you'll see. So just keep in mind here that I probably likely will change empath to oxygen being, but all right, 'cause I don't care for this term empath. So, but also, I'm using empath here and an oxygen being as somebody who's emotional.
Right.
So yeah, so I'll probably say, the introduction here, the oxygen being is someone who or emotionally sensitive, empath. It
Mhm.
has an emotionally sensitive psychology. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
All right, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. The
But
emotional.
before we start on this, unless there's something else that's come up in you since last time, that's more important than this.
Not anything super pressing. I mean, I do want to continue on with the hearing and helping
Oh
course.
yes, oh yes, oh yes,
Uh,
oh yes. Okay,
yeah.
this won't take too long. I just want to bring this in as an idea, as a conceptuality, because it's very, very powerful. And since I'm involved with it now, I've got all the excitement. I like to share that because now there's an extra energy that comes with it, which emphasizes it and locks it in.
Right.
Otherwise you can share anytime, but when there's energy, it's particularly important to do so,
Yeah. Yeah.
or valuable to do so. All right, listening.
Okay. The emotionally sensitive empath psychology is akin to a being made of oxygen. It has to be extremely careful when coming close to open flame. Any contact will not only exacerbate the flame, but will consume the oxygen also. The emotionally sensitive are amplifiers. They not only amplify the good in others, but the bad also. That is for undisciplined empaths or those that are unaware they are empaths and possess this power. Empaths maybe have real power.
Yeah,
Most do not realize this. They are surprised when things blow up in their faces. They are confused when helping others and see real benefit to the person they helped, but still get negative feedback or mixed feedback. The person may even acknowledge the help, but there's still an undercurrent of negativity or resentment. This is because the empath is an amplifier or an exacerbator. They amplify both the good and the bad, hence the mixed reactions. The key is for empaths to be selective in their approach and interaction.
wow.
To continue with the oxygen being analogy, the empath needs to learn to morph into H2O when dealing with flames, or should that be CO2?
Oh, do I have it C2O?
Yes.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. CO2. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, or CO2, depending on the type of flame. The empath thus needs to learn and acquire strategies and abilities for appropriate adaptation to the circumstances. But that isn't enough. The appropriate adaptation has to be before the fact, before engagement starts. Once the flame is engaged as oxygen, it is too late. There is no remedy. The oxygen being has to morph into H2O or CO2 before engaging.
Yeah. That's so huge. That's so huge. So This came about, I wrote this specifically for someone,
Okay.
um, and they actually asked me to do so because I sort of explained this, and they'd come to realize, holy crap, I am really oxygen, because when I see flame, I'm kind of drawn to it, and then I blow up the flame and basically implode myself at the same time, right?
Hmm.
So this really bothered them, that they're going to help, which oxygen helps a flame, but really it destroys itself and makes the fire worse.
Right.
So this emotional sensitivity, this being drawn to flame, really. But there's more to this, which is the key. So obviously now we're talking about anticipation, right?
Right.
That's just necessary. And I'll elaborate on all this. This is like super rough, right? There's very little, but so the question becomes, what are the real world equivalents of hydrogen and carbon, and what other compounds are available to the oxygen being? I wanted to make the analogy extended a bit more, not just with flame, because as you know, we've mentioned before, oxygen is the most uh, uh, com, combinative, yeah, element of in the periodic table. Yeah.
Right.
So all right, let's read a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. Oxygen, a highly reactive nonmetallic element and oxidizing agent that readily forms compounds, notably oxides, with most elements. By mass, oxygen is the third most abundant element in the universe after hydrogen and helium, 21% of air. At standard temperature and pressure, two atoms of the oxygen bind to form dioxygen, a diatomic gas that is colorless, odorless, and tasteless with the formula O2. Thus, the oxygen being cannot actually exist in their original form. They have to bind with something, even if it is with themselves. If they don't, they can bind inappropriately to whatever comes along.
Right. And Beena and I were just talking about this, and I have to add it in still. So when we look at O, just oxygen O, the base element, it can't exist on its own in standard temperature and STP, standard
Right,
temperature and pressure, right? Combines with itself. To me, this is analogous or powerful to think of as self-awareness,
right,
right? So you are awareness, but really under normal conditions, you can't exist. You have to have self-awareness, and therefore you become O2.
right.
So you could say, your early childhood, a baby or whatever, until you develop that self-aware, those are abnormal conditions.
Mm-hmm.
They're not standard temperature and pressure. They right. STP is normal conditions. It's a somewhat abnormal condition. Some people keep that in, being inside themselves, being immersed, animalistic behavior, overwrought by passions and emotions. It all becomes abnormal conditions. You go back to that singularity of awareness, not the duality of self-awareness. I find this absolutely fascinating and incredible, right?
Yeah.
All right, so now let's go a little bit further and look at some of the other combinations.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll put this. Well, you'll see, just for this next little section. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oxygen is the most abundant element by mass in the Earth's crust as part of oxide compounds such as silicon dioxide, making up half of the crust's mass. Thus, 50% of Earth and 33% of water. This is most interesting as the oxygen being is primarily Earth focused, not air as we'd imagine. It's also more prevalent in water than in air. An oxygen being is thus not what it likely imagines itself to be.
This I find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
It's too incredible. I mean, it's completely, philosophy of opposites completely reversed,
Right,
right?
right,
And even if you take, in the classic fire air word, and this has come up now in the art as a part of inner
right.
schooling, because they're all into alchemy and all this stuff, right? So even if you take fire, it's still, oxygen is still greater than air, right? I mean, it's at best 33%, but I would imagine that the fuel and the oxygen is like 90%, and the flame is a very small part of it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But still, in terms of the conception, and if we take this even further, Beena, which I didn't mention earlier, when you take Earth as the primary manifestation of oxygen, this is likely why we are matter if we think of ourselves as an oxygen personality, right? I find this too incredible. And of course, we are matter combined with water as a body. This is what we are. Yes, we rely on air, but it's formation. It's not what you think it to be. So
Right.
philosophy of opposite very much comes into this. I just find this really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so now we come to another interesting part here. Let me just take this. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Oxygen is an important part of the atmosphere and is necessary to sustain most terrestrial life as it is used in respiration. However, it is too chemically reactive to remain a free element in Earth's atmosphere without being continuously replenished. A big deal for the oxygen being to be aware of. They need support to be partnered, etc., as on their own they will struggle to exist and will inevitably end up bonding with whatever is at hand, appropriate or not.
And this I have seen also,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I see this time and time again, this type of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
They have to combine, and if they don't combine appropriately, they combine inappropriately, whether they want to or not.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
very, very, very powerful. All right, now I love this next one.
Okay.
This next section here, right? I thought this, I copied this from Wikipedia, and I haven't gone through this with the discernment that we are
Okay.
doing now. I just did so earlier with Beena. I think this is where we got to down here somewhere. Yeah, we got to this with this one. But okay, this not this one, but the above here. So
Yeah.
another form. Okay, go ahead.
Another form of oxygen, ozone, O3, strongly absorbs UVB radiation, and consequently, the high altitude ozone layer helps protect the biosphere from ultraviolet radiation, but is a pollutant near the surface where it is a byproduct of smog.
I added the emphasis on the italics on pollutant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Here we see a particular aspect of the oxygen being. In this particular configuration, they are protective and valuable when in the higher aspects of life, but this can or will be seen as a negative when dealing with the lower aspects of the world. Thus, sharing of moreness by the oxygen being needs to be judiciously managed and is not always appropriate to share. In fact, it's downright inappropriate to do so in common circumstance. This is essential to understanding and being noble, and why it's a way of being not typically shared or revealed.
Right. It's something you do privately. Yeah.
Right, right.
And this just comes in a very direct situation. Because of mentality of opposites. You come and you share moreness, and the person realizes it. If they caught up in the superiority paradigm and the mentality of opposites and comparative mindset in particular, they now see themselves relative to you as lessness.
Right.
Now, if they feel less, that feeling it can be strong in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they feel it, it's a reality.
Right.
In their minds, because of hierarchy, they can only imagine that they are feeling less because you made the effort, you
Right.
intended to make them feel less, because
Right.
that's what they would have done. So now you not only have them be a victim of their own nonsense, but they are transferring it onto you.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I unfortunately, boy, oh boy, I get this, or I've had this way too much in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And once they felt this and come to believe it, you got a feeling belief loop. No
Right.
matter what the hell you say, you cannot convince them. No, I wasn't trying to make you feel less. You did that on your own.
Right. Right.
Doesn't work. So
Yeah.
this is, and it's something that really bothers me, or at least it doesn't bother in the use of, presses on me, I should say, in a sense of, like you said, it's a pity, it's a sadness,
Right. Yeah.
it's a blight on things, it's an unnecessariness, it's a waste. Oh boy, you try sometimes to share and share moreness, and it just backfires.
Right. Right.
I get this so often. And I've spent ridiculous amounts of time trying to undo this because I want to resolve this conundrum. I refuse to accept it and say, well, okay, you just got to let those people. I don't know. I just refuse to do that. Okay, so that's the next one is really, really potent to me. And we haven't gone through the others, but this next one, this is, I'll explain why in a moment.
Okay. In normal triplet form, 3O2 molecules are paramagnetic. That is, they form a magnet in the presence of a magnetic field.
Yeah. So the three should be a superscript. I tried to copy it and I didn't want to copy it across.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You know, it's a superscript. It's not actually 302. It's a triplet. So it's a little different. Anyway, so this is fascinating to me because we had this discussion before, right? About brain waves, literally, or the brain literally producing an electromagnetic field.
Right.
In the same way as a flashlight produces it. When you turn off the flashlight, the light does not cease to exist.
Right.
If you use a laser, which is a tight beam, it's a coherent electromagnetic field, right? There's coherency as opposed to being dispersed like regular light.
Mm-hmm.
That literally carries on forever.
Right.
Yes? So electromagnetic fields can exist independent of the hardware that produced them.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if we have a stable electromagnetic configuration, if our brains can produce a stable, like, change the hardware to, instead of producing diffuse light, you produce a laser beam. But even more, if you have it where it's contained and it's not like a laser beam, it's just directional, it travels in one direction. If you can just have it self-contained, here comes the magic, right? If you take oxygen now, fine, we've understood we're oxygen, and then under STP conditions, normal conditions, we combine with ourselves to make O2. But in triplet form, this is really interesting. I had to go look it up to see what this is. I imagined it to be like O2, 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 like maybe in a triangle, but it's actually not. It's O and O connected with all the electrons around them. Anyway, it's a different diagram. And what it essentially is, it's O2 connected with two halves of itself.
Okay.
Which is fascinating. And it results in two free electrons. So it's an unusual configuration, and it's more stable, which is fascinating to me, even though it has the free electrons.
Right.
Now for the first level of this is if you have an O2 and you are combining with a half and a half of an O2, you're now developing aspects.
Okay.
Right? Because an aspect is a lesser personality, it's a lesser self, which an O2 in this case a half self, right? So that's the first thing. But secondly, and the key thing that made me really excited here was that this particular configuration, which is more stable, is also magnetic in the presence of a magnetic field. Now, if we take this idea of making a self-contained electromagnetic field produced by the brain itself, if it can take on a configuration which is stable and more stable than what it would just be sort of under normal conditions, because this is a particular aspect, a particular configuration now, but also magnetic. This is incredible, because if you're existing, let's say we literally can take our awareness and create a field that makes it separate out from the brain, right?
Okay.
We can have right next to us here, we're going to have this, our awareness separate to the body and the brain, right? We've now separated from the body. We're existing as awareness itself. We would like to be able to move, would we not?
Right.
Voila. We know how we can do this now by learning from oxygen. Become a triplet form that's paramagnetic, and there you go. You use the Earth's magnetic field and off you go. Now, why stop with magnetic fields, right? Surely gravity can be utilized in the same way, yeah? So, or anti-gravity, that you can use gravity as a magnetic field, yeah, to propel or attract, either way. Yeah. So, but just this idea of oxygen, since we've seen other things where oxygen, emotional sensitivity, connectivity is so. Wow, now in this 302 form, it's not only more stable, but it's also magnetic in
Mm-hmm.
the presence of a magnetic field, which is fantastic. Which is fantastic. But and this is also useful, right? I mean, this is the ideal, because we don't want to go around being magnetic, because then we'll, whenever you come near metal, you're going to connect to the metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not particularly useful. You're only magnetic when you're in the presence of a magnetic field.
Right.
Most useful. And most magnetic fields are going to be too weak to really have, unless you come really close to them, except
Mm-hmm.
for the Earth's one, which again isn't all that strong, but relative to you and your no mass that you have, or very little mass,
Right.
this is, you want to go traveling the universe, there you go.
Right.
Or traveling within the world as well. You
Yeah.
just have to get your polarity shifted right. So, wow, what a fantastic mechanism for
Mm-hmm.
traveling around the world.
Yeah.
All right. So, there's all sorts of other things here. I'll come back to it another day when I've had chance to go through it. Just to look at more detail, because you're looking at like corrosion, how we want to not be corrosive,
Mm-hmm.
how we don't want to be, other forms of it. But I think it's useful to know, like alcohols and acids and stuff. Yeah. Um, but look, aluminium. There's an
Yes.
I in it,
Yep.
Americans.
Yep.
So aluminium, this is all part of oxygen, right?
Right.
Yeah,
There's only an I in it in British spelling.
I know, I
American
know.
spelling, it is removed. Or the
You
second
know,
I should say.
correct. But uranium,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Yeah. But then you're going to say, yeah, but what about platinum? Shouldn't it be platinum? And yes, it should be. Yeah. So anyway, it's too fascinating though how like I think aluminium is the most abundant metal.
Interesting.
Yeah, I believe so. So all of this stuff though, more ways. I want to look at it though, how it applies in a more abstract way, right? I mean, yes, obviously, alcohols and which really, when you look at an alcohol in an abstract form, it's a poison, but also it's a reagent, and it's a combustive. I mean, it's fire, it's flame. And when you look at it in that way, we start to see, oh wow, really really interesting. But solvents and stuff. In other words, at the end of the day, you can be anything as oxygen, right?
Right.
You can combine with pretty much absolutely anything. So this is, I was talking to my friend here, Charlotte Lottie, anyway, and she was taking chemistry at the time, so she didn't quite get my abstract analogy, but it was very
Right.
interesting. Anyway, so I think that, just for another time, I actually started to write a story. Yeah. Bob didn't know what an empath was, even though it should have been a sublet. And I'll have to go through this again and look at this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share this concept of the oxygen being.
Yeah.
Right now, in the start of the article, it's connected to being emotionally sensitive, and I'll change that to just making it a more overall analogy
Mm-hmm.
of being, which is useful for us as a self-conception. And I
Right.
think it's really potent, because at the end of the day, I really do feel that we have this ability to be anything, in a psychological point of view. We can be corrosive, we can be inflammatory, we can
Mm-hmm.
be a solvent. And I think this is really 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 potent to understand though. And then to find the, I never got to that point really, to say, okay, I need to combine with hydrogen. What is hydrogen when I'm looking to be water?
Right.
What is the psychological abstract equivalent of hydrogen or carbon?
Right.
I find, if we can figure that out, we say, oh, hydrogen is, let's say, patience. Uh, you know, then now is, oh, okay, or whatever. It's not really patience; it's probably something else, but still. I think this is going to be really instructive and valuable.
Yeah.
But it's just enough to be aware that, hey, if I'm oxygen, I can't go near flames.
Right.
I can't try and help a flame. You're just going to make it worse. Not possible. Right? And this applies, of course, when you're dealing with narcissists and things like that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, they are flames.
Right.
They're burning. They're on fire. Yeah. So very, very, very exciting and potent. Yes.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So now let's get to other important things. Beena, any comments? Are you
I'm just
Beena?
enjoying the conversation, this whole
Yes,
conversation.
it's fun. It's fun. It's really, really exciting for me. That oxygen thing, when I clicked onto it, it was like, holy moly, I was actually observing somebody in real time then doing exactly that.
Right.
Now they didn't go to try and put out the fire. They were just attracted by the fire.
Hmm.
The fire pulled them in and blew up, and they got consumed. And
Hmm.
of course, the fire too burns itself out, obviously. So
Right.
neither party benefited. It was during that time when I was working on the book, and so anyway, yeah, powerful stuff. But I think when you come to other aspects of it, like with the ozone and nobility, it's
Hmm.
like, wow, I always knew about ozone, but I didn't know that ozone was a negative and lower down. So yeah,
Right. Right.
I thought this is fascinating. This is
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's really
I've
interesting.
lived in a place that had almost no ozone, a big ozone hole in the atmosphere above
Mm.
that, and it was quite something. It was
Yeah.
not fun. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Or in that aspect, like sunburn, you burn like crazy, really.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so let me go back to screen sharing, and we are on listening to Hear More Part 2, and I believe we were on like slide 8.
Yep. That's what I had written down.
Righty then, very good. I like when I remember.
Yes.
It's just good memory training. You got to practice it a little bit here. You don't use it, you lose it.
It's true.
Okay. Where's my background here? Maybe I shouldn't have moved that. Oh,
Oh,
man, it
there
does
it
have
is.
to be moved a little bit. Yeah, well, because I moved it, but then I thought, well, the balance is just when there's no background, but likely there's stuff that's there. You see, like this now. All right.
Mhm.
Anyway, all right. So, do you have any notes to share on anything, or we're just going to continue going through it like we've been doing?
I had not. I started to do a repeat back for this section, and then I didn't. I got into the tasks and exercises and didn't come back to it.
Okay.
Um, but I'm trying to remember. There was something in the previous section. What had we
Oh,
ended
oh, oh.
on?
So I need to go back.
Well, I'm trying to remember. There was something that we had ended on last time. Um, oh, I think it was where we were talking about keeping in mind that in all of our hearing, sharing, all of this, and regardless of who we are hearing or who is being heard, whether it's us hearing someone else or whether someone else is hearing us, that we have to keep in mind that all of it could be wrong. And
Oh,
I think that's such a huge point to me to keep that in mind, that keeping in mind that all of this could be wrong
yes,
doesn't mean that
yes,
you are invalidating what the person is sharing with you or vice
yes,
versa. It doesn't mean
yes.
that you can't hear what they're saying, but I think it's like it helps protect you and the other person
Correct,
from
correct.
automatically assuming truth in what's like kind of objective truth in what's
Yes,
being said.
yes. Not just objective, but also, or let's put it this way: bigger context truth, but little t truth as well.
Right, right,
Sometimes people can come and they can just lie from start to finish.
right.
Right? Every single thing they say is a lie. Now, does that mean that we cannot extract something from? Oh, yes, because let's say you knew that everything is a lie. the fact that they are lying about those things tells you something.
Right.
So most people tend to assume, well, this is a waste of time. I can't get anything out, but you can. You, with capital H, hearing, that can sometimes be more instructive than them telling what's going on.
Right. Right.
Because let's say, for instance, I was talking about a relationship, right? They could just say blandly, well, we get up in the morning and then, we talk and all right, we maybe argue a little bit or whatever. And they could just say something that's very innocuous. But what they lie about is going to tell you what they want to cover up, what's important to them, what they're embarrassed about, afraid of, etc., etc. So, it doesn't mean we can't get value. But yes, it is a really, really, really powerful awareness. And I'm glad you shared that as something, the emphasis of it, and you mentioning it again, because we default to assuming people tell the truth.
Right.
Now, in this, it's most instructive to not go and default to assuming that people are lying all the time.
Right.
But to default to paying attention to what is the actuality of the circumstance.
Right.
To pay attention to appropriate particularity. Yes?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even if the person isn't lying, it doesn't mean that what they're saying can't be wrong. I mean, they could be being very truthful, but it could still be wrong. And same for you. I could be sharing something that's very truthful to me, but I could still be wrong. And so to just keep that in the back of your mind, that just because something is resonant and real and means something doesn't necessarily mean it is appropriate in the given circumstance or whatever, or that it's the full truth, or that it's the only truth, or any of these things. So yeah, I think that to me is a really important skill of hearing, because I think I tend to default to taking what people say and, like you said, kind of an assumption of truth, that if someone is sharing something in an authentic way, I tend to look for the truth in it. And not that that's a bad thing, but just that it can be a slippery slope if you're not also keeping in mind the bubble that's inevitably involved for each of us. That, just because this might be true and real and whatever in this particular bubble doesn't mean that there's not other alternatives or new places to go or things that we haven't thought of before. So I think that's a really helpful thing for me to keep in mind with hearing, to always have that in the back of your mind, that this is not necessarily the only, or even if it is true and appropriate and good right now, it doesn't mean that it will be forever, or that there's not, room for change. Just keeping the sort of the unknown in mind, I guess, when you're hearing.
Yes. And really, Beena, are you here? I'm just saying, if you heard all that Erica said on this topic of truth, right? It is an absolute magical discernment on discernment. Isn't that what you just did? You said that to really, when we're paying attention, when we're being discerning, we understand the difference between capital T truth and little t truth.
Right.
We understand the difference between accuracy and belief also.
Right.
And accuracy and truth.
Right.
All of these are different. Plus, we understand that truth is the truth of now. We understand the time contextuality of not just time context, but other greater context. Maybe truthful in the small context, but not in the bigger context. So we understand that truth and accuracy are both incredibly contextual, as is belief. So when we take those three, truth, belief, and accuracy, and see, they're all contextual and they're all variables that interact with each other. Now we truly start on our journey of capital H hearing, because isn't capital H hearing absolutely capital D discernment?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's the first time I think I've ever used capital D discernment, even though I've spelt it.
Right.
But to differentiate between kind of regular discernment, which is
Right.
always capitalized for me, as it's a power conception, but capital D discernment is this: when you really go into the depths of discernment, and we see this layeredness, this interactive connectivity, and this differentiation between the terms, which are a small, truth and accuracy. You'd say it's the same thing. No, no.
Right. Right.
Somebody can be inaccurate and truthful, right?
Yes.
Can
Absolutely.
be accurate and untruthful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, they can be lying their asses off and still actually be saying the truth.
Passport and COVID card.
The what?
My passport and COVID card.
Sorry, so um did you look in the thing where all the other papers are upstairs?
Can't find that.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Take care of
Oh,
it.
you
No
don't
problem.
need it right
Yeah,
now?
no.
Okay. All right. Okay, sorry. I know Joe has been looking for his COVID card for something, and I thought he needed it right now, but he said he's good, so it can wait. Okay. Uh-oh, did it freeze?
Mine is where my driver's license is.
Okay. You what?
I say mine is where my driver's license is.
Well, ours normally are with all of our other important papers, but when we were traveling, we had them in a separate place, and I think I stuck them back up there, but he said he couldn't find where those were, so
Interesting.
so I'll have to go up and help after a while.
Yeah. Forage and burrow.
Yes, I like it.
Just to make it a bit poetic.
Yes.
I love this, just to get back to the re-emphasis of discernment. In this context that you were saying, to be aware that somebody can be completely and utterly wrong in everything as an extreme. This is just, it's an awareness which is so uncommon, or so contrary to our goodness, that we need to be consciously, deliberately aware of it,
Right.
and bring it in by design. Otherwise you can get trampled by
Right.
it.
Right.
Anybody who's ever dealt with addicts knows this.
Yeah.
They can really, unfortunately, they really learn to lie exceedingly well. And after a while you just say, well, you don't know, they could be. And this is carried over for me a little bit. It's not from dealing with addicts, but it's a hard truth that you have to carry around with you, to assume this even of your dearest
Right.
friends.
Right.
Right. Now, we are skilled and adept at looking at intent, but I don't care how good your intent is to be truthful. That doesn't mean you're being accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. Right.
And that's hard to separate that out, because if we are hung up in people pleasing,
Right.
we'll please somebody a little bit. We get stuck. But I don't want to think that Beena or Erica is inaccurate. I love them. Their intent is good.
Right.
So, we can resist these, what might be seen as unpleasant or awful truths, but they're not really. It's just the fact of the matter is,
Right.
your intent matters. Yes, and I understand your intent, but that don't mean that I must be blind to the fact that you're going to be inaccurate
Right.
on occasion.
Right.
Because I know this is so for myself.
Yeah.
And one of the areas where I absolutely make this effort to do so as a rigorous discipline is when it comes to reading people, or knowing people, or assessing people, right? I've seen, and I've been completely wrong, but
Right.
this,
Right.
and it's turned out later on that I've been wrong. So yes, I do have a degree of skill, because obviously from being wrong, you learn and update. However, just because I have an element of skill doesn't mean that I cannot be wrong, as has happened before. So I start with the assumption, yes, my analysis, but I'm likely, or not likely, but I can be wrong. How likely, I don't say. I simply keep it in mind that there is this likelihood, and I kind of give it a greater preponderance of percentage of likelihood, of probability is the word I'm looking for, because it keeps me open to the fact that I might be right? And if you're not